I'm Rachel, and although sharing my tale makes me feel a little awkward, I feel compelled to do so. Something really private that I was never able to share with anyone, but perhaps telling my tale will help me let go. My brother and his wife asked me to watch my nephew Ethan for a few days during their short weekend trip last summer. Ethan is only 18 and a very intelligent child, so spending time with him is usually enjoyable, so I agreed without hesitation. The first day passed perfectly normally, and Ethan and I watched movies, played games, and laughed a lot. However, I had no idea that the second day would bring one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. That morning, Ethan told me he wanted to go out, and I assumed he was meeting up with his friends. I was happy to have some alone time, because sometimes you just need a little space, right? After Ethan left, I went to my bedroom to unwind. I spent some time browsing social media before deciding to watch something to cheer myself up. Everything seemed normal, and I never even considered the possibility that Ethan might return early, but when the door abruptly opened, I experienced an unfathomable shock. Ethan surprised me by saying, "I realized I forgot my keys, so I came back," but the shocked expression in his eyes spoke louder than words for a few seconds. There was an awkward silence in the room, and I wished the ground would just switch and swallow me whole. I tried to salvage the situation by asking Ethan why he hadn't knocked on the door, but he just looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Rachel, but I think I should stay here." As I tried to figure out what was going on, I noticed that Ethan seemed to be hiding something. He told me the truth, and I realized that this wasn't just about that one embarrassing moment, there was more to it than that. There was a strange expression in Ethan's eyes. Was that embarrassment or something else? Even though I couldn't tell what he was going to say, I felt even more uneasy because he wasn't leaving the room. "What do you mean that you must remain? Could you clarify, Ethan?" My voice was shaking as I asked. Ethan inhaled deeply before stating, "This may sound strange. Rachel, I was surprised to hear something about you this morning while I was chatting with my friends." "What did you hear?" "I believe there may have been a misunderstanding, but someone claimed to have seen a video of you," and as he stared at the ground, my heart raced. "What kind of video?" "Ethan, what are you talking about?" I'm not sure why, but Ethan's face became even more crimson. "Rachel, I don't know who filmed it or how, but my buddy said something that really disturbed me. I didn't want to see you like this," and his comments hit me like a ton of bricks when I got home. What video and what kind of miscommunication might have occurred at that time? Everything seemed so unclear. I was upset and concerned about Ethan because, if what he was saying was accurate, I might have a big issue. "Tell me exactly what you saw and heard, Ethan. If you're keeping something from me, you must tell me right away, or we could end up in hot water." I spoke in a firmer tone. After a brief pause, Ethan pulled out his phone and handed me a video, but before it could play, he paused. "Perhaps it would be best if you didn't see this, but Rachel," he said, "I realized this was bigger than I had imagined. If someone had actually invaded my privacy and it had spread the way Ethan described, the situation could get out of control." I sat down and tried to calm myself. "Ethan, you need to tell me everything right now. We have to figure this out together," he said. "Someone might have recorded you. It could be someone trying to hurt you." Ethan said, "All right," and nodded. I was worried for Ethan as well, because if we didn't talk to the right people, this could ruin both of our lives. However, deep down I knew there was a more complicated story behind all of this, and at that moment, Ethan and I just looked at each other, and the silence between us made this situation even heavier. "Rachel, we're not going to handle this alone, so we need to involve the police," I said calmly. "We need to work this out together, but for the time being, don't tell anyone, not even my brother. This needs to remain between us." The sincerity in Ethan's voice struck me as he nodded. "I trust you, Rachel. I just don't want anyone to hurt you." Ethan was still a child, but the maturity he displayed that day made me see a different side of him. It seemed like what had happened had brought us closer in a strange way. When my brother and his wife returned, we tried to act like nothing had changed, but every time we looked at each other, I could feel that silent connection still there. Over time, Ethan began to reach out to me more frequently, sending messages like Rachel's, "If something's wrong, please tell me." At first, I thought his protective attitude was just a reaction to what we had experienced, but as the days passed, I began to feel something strange, a warmth I couldn't quite explain. Was Ethan's concern for me more than just harmless worry? More importantly, was I beginning to feel something for him too? Another message from Ethan appeared on my phone while I was by myself at home. "I need your assistance." Rachel, I was hesitant to say no, but I couldn't bring myself to say no. I wrote back, and when Ethan entered, his worried expression was recognizable. Even though I didn't believe what I was saying, Ethan sat down and leaned in closer to Rachel. "I have to tell you something," he said. "I can't stop thinking about what happened that day." I could hear the tremble in his voice. Ethan wasn't trying to hide anything, he just needed to let it out. "Ethan, we need to move past this. After everything, I've come to realize that you are such a great person. I need you and feel safe when we are together." His words felt like they were a wrench in my gut. I was at a loss for words, but I suddenly understood that the kind of intimacy Ethan was providing was something I hadn't had in years, not even during my marriage to Thomas. Ethan's integrity. As I stared at Ethan, I felt like I was engaged in a battle with his unexpected maturity, despite his advanced age. My marriage to Thomas had become dull and repetitive, and his incessant attention to work made me feel like a stranger in my own home. However, Ethan seemed to understand me in ways that Thomas had never understood in just a few weeks, so what was the right thing to do? His openness and honesty confronted me with something I hadn't felt in a long time, the feeling of being understood. My marriage to Thomas had become routine, with the same morning greetings and evening silent dinners, but when I spoke to Ethan, I felt alive, even though I knew this wasn't right. Despite our considerable age difference, Ethan, my nephew, managed to develop a bond over time that was out of my control. Every time Ethan and I started texting or making brief visits, he would begin with, "I was just checking in on you," but our conversations always went deeper. When I spoke with him, I could tell him everything I couldn't tell Thomas about my marriage, and whatever was lacking seemed to be filled by Ethan's presence. One evening, Thomas informed me that he would be working late, and right then, my phone buzzed. It was from Ethan. "Rachel, may I see you? We need to talk this time." I didn't think twice about coming over. When Ethan got to the door, his face was grave. "I realize this is crazy, Rachel, but I can't stop thinking about talking to you and spending time with you because it makes me feel different." I glanced at him and hesitated for a second before speaking. "Ethan," I stated in a hushed voice, "that I felt the same way, but this is wrong. You are my nephew, and Thomas is my husband. We must set these emotions aside." Ethan moved in closer. "But I can tell by the look in your eyes that Thomas isn't making you happy. You deserve to be with someone who appreciates you, Rachel." He was correct when he suggested that my anger and disappointment with Thomas had turned into a wall that strengthened my bond with Ethan. "Ethan, we can't do this," I murmured, my voice shaking. "What we're feeling is just a temporary confusion. I care about you so much, but if we continue down this path, we'll both get hurt." Ethan took a deep breath and said, "You're right, but I needed to tell you this. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. Know that someone cares about you." After Ethan left that night, I thought for a long time that I needed to figure out how to fill the gaps in my marriage with Thomas and how to set boundaries with my connection to Ethan, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. One weekend, Thomas took the day off from work, and we both realized we hadn't spent much time together lately, so we planned a dinner, but no matter how hard we tried, the distance between us couldn't be closed. During the meal, we only talked about casual topics and avoided anything more serious. There was a profound silence in the van, my heart felt constricted, and a rising emptiness was stirring within me while Thomas, as usual, was engrossed in his phone, checking work emails on the drive home. I shouted to Thomas, "Can you pull over? I need some fresh air." He agreed and drew the car over to the side of the road. I got out and took a few steps to attempt to breathe. Without saying anything, Thomas kept browsing through his phone until my phone buzzed, signaling that Ethan had sent me a message. "Are you okay, Rachel?" I've been thinking about you, and when I said, I'm fine, but I don't think I can take this anymore, my palm trembled. The response almost instantly arrived. Ethan's message, I'm here, I'm coming to you, made my heart race. Within 2 minutes, he arrived, saw Thomas in the car, and approached me without hesitation. Rachel, is everything okay? He asked in a worried voice. Thomas looked up from his phone and asked Ethan, why are you here? Ethan observed, this was a family dinner, but he responded resolutely, maybe Rachel needs a little more than that. At that time, I had to decide between Ethan's sensitivity toward me and Thomas's unwavering indifference. I knew I couldn't remain silent any longer as I turned to Thomas. Do you realize how much you disregard me? Thomas, it seems like you don't even realize I'm here, even though you sit next to me. Surprised, Thomas said Rachel, his remarks didn't deter me, but now isn't the time to talk about it. I continued, my eyes welling with tears, I know it's not the right time or place, but this has been going on for years, and I can't carry it any longer. Ethan was silent as he stood next to me, but I could see the resolve in his eyes. If you want to go, I'll take you, Rachel, he murmured quietly. Thomas simply returned to his phone and began typing a message for me without saying anything. This was a pivotal moment. I said, let's go, to Ethan as we got into the car, and I was experiencing a range of complicated feelings. After driving quietly for a few minutes, Ethan stopped and turned to face me. Do you think we're doing the right thing, Rachel? He asked. I lowered my head, but as soon as I turned to face him, I said, I don't know Ethan, but I need to change something. Ethan gave me a small smile and put his hand on my shoulder before we began. I realized then that my life would never be the same.